Oh, howdy all, grab yourself a drink. It is time for some PathOfExile discussion. Grungy Games today provided all of the stats of the new gems that are coming in the Crucible expansion. Now what they've done here is they've given us the details of those gems when they are gem level 20 and quality 20. There's a couple of things that we can't tell from this. We don't know how much they're going to scale between 20 and 30, or even potentially beyond level 30 if you can get them to scale higher than that. However, there's a number of general rules of thumb that we can apply. Most skill gems scale by about 11% per gem level after that. So we can just broadly assume that that's going to be the case for these gems. Some will be a little bit better, some will be a little bit worse. We can tell the most important things though, and that is how they're going to perform in early endgame, which tends to be when you need the power the most. Additionally, there's a whole lot of really interesting gems in this lot. The most interesting, in my opinion, is Vaal Firestorm, just because it has so much raw power. But there's a few things that really do transform what's possible in the game at the moment. Manaforged arrows is very interesting indeed. Let's start though with the Vaal versions of Absolution and Dominating Blow. I'm going to bunch these two together because they are so fundamentally similar to each other, although they do have their own individual nuances. Now, Absolution and Dominating Blow are both what I might term middle tier skills at the moment. They're both completely viable, they can do all content in the game, but they're not part of the center of the meta at the moment. They're reasonably solid. They are getting huge boosts through the use of these Vaal skills. They both work on quite similar principles. What they do is casting the Vaal version will buff one of your existing minions that's been spawned by the gem. So with Absolution, when you kill a monster with it, and also sometimes when you damage a rare or unique monster with it, you will gain a Sentinel of Absolution up to a maximum of 3. What Vaal Absolution will do is it will take one of those Sentinels and it will turbocharge it into an Uber Sentinel of Absolution. Now these Uber Sentinels of Absolution deal triple damage and take 70% less damage. So they are super strong, and they're going to be an absolute terror, destroying monsters. They also have new abilities as well. Essentially what this is going to do is take you from having 3 Sentinels of Absolution to 1 Uber and 2 normal Sentinels of Absolution for a short period, which is a 67% more multiplier to damage. But, very important, this Sentinel of Absolution does not count towards the regular limit, so you can then gain a new Sentinel of Absolution as well, taking yourself up to a total of 3 normal and 1 Uber Sentinels of Absolution for a total of double the base damage that this skill would normally do. In short, this is a huge burst damage cooldown for Absolution, and it's something that you can keep about 50% uptime on. So it has a base duration of 15 seconds and a soul gain prevention window of 30 seconds. So this is a very potent bonus that you can get. You can bring it up when you need it for fighting something that's tougher than most of the rest of the map. Maybe you've come across a rare monster that is extremely tanky. Maybe it's hugely resistant to lightning. Maybe it's just something that's really dangerous to you. And at that point, you can go, all right, you know what? I'm going to summon my Vaal Absolution and I'm going to use that in order to burst this down a bit quicker. And of course, it's going to be really good against bosses. That is where I think this skill is going to really shine. And because this Uber Sentinel of Absolution is so tanky, with that 70% damage reduction, it's probably going to survive the odd time that it gets hit by a boss slam or something along those lines. Now, the Vaal Dominating Blow version is very similar in mechanics, but it has 3 charges. And also Dominating Blow allows you to save up 9 regular summoned Sentinels of Dominance, plus 3 magic, plus 1 rare. Now what Vaal Domination allows you to do, if you're willing to really min-max gameplay, and I think that this is a very high skill ceiling skill, where people who can very precisely execute complex strategies will be paid off for it, you can then use Vaal Domination to turbocharge just your rare Sentinel of Dominance, then go and make yourself another rare Sentinel of Dominance. This is a sort of optimal way to play with Vaal Domination. I think it's going to be very difficult to do in practice, and I don't think many people will succeed in doing this. I certainly don't expect that I'd be able to do it all that well. However, if you're able to pull it off, you will definitely be rewarded for it. Vaal Domination looks like it's quite a strong skill as well, and I really say if you like the existing base versions of either Absolution or Dominating Blow, then the Vaal versions are miles better. Now there's something very important about these Vaal versions as well, and that is that you don't necessarily need the Vaal version of them to be gem level 21. Let me explain on that. Let's say that you have Absolution that is gem level 21, and it is not the Vaal version of it. You can then go through the map creating your Sentinels of Absolution. Then you have a separate copy of Vaal Absolution, and let's say you've only got this leveled up to level 13. You can then just cast Vaal Absolution on one of the Sentinels that was created by the level 21 Absolution, And the way that I read this skill, that Vaal Absolution will actually empower that level 21 Sentinel just as well as it would have empowered one of its own ones. So that's something that you want to keep in mind as a potential very powerful strategy. It's probably the case that a lower level version of Vaal Absolution than gem level 21 will have less than 200% more damage, but it will still be something that is a meaningful upgrade when you get it. Ultimately though, of course, you are going to want to have a Vaal Absolution that is gem level 21, but that's going to be an aspirational goal for you to work towards over a little while. The next gem is Vaal Reap. Now, Reap is already good, but Vaal Reap makes it even better. Vaal Reap deals twice the damage that Reap does. On top of that, it also leaves a pile of bad goo on the ground that persists for 5 seconds, which is pretty substantial. But the main benefit of it is that for 8 seconds it lets you exceed your normal maximum for blood charges. This will take your blood charges count up from 5 to 9, at least at gem level 20. And that means that instead of dealing 175% of base damage with Reap, you're going to be dealing 235% of base damage with Reap. What's this as a more multiplier, you might be asking? It's about a 34% more multiplier. So essentially, you cast Vaal Reap once, it does lots of damage because it's just inherently a really good skill, and then you get an approximately 34% more multiplier to Reap that is going to persist for several additional seconds. Again, it seems at the moment that you can have a separate copy of Vaal Reap and get this benefit. You can reap the rewards if you like from a low level version of Vaal Reap. So let's say you've got a gem level 15 Vaal Reap and you've got your level 21 Reap. Your level 21 Reap is 6 linked and it's doing damage, but then you've got Vaal Reap providing this buff, and the level 15 version should still be able to do this, although it's entirely possible that it might only add 3 to your maximum number of blood charges instead of 4. Additionally, the boiling blood debuff that it puts on the ground is just going to put bad goo on the ground that enemies are going to get killed by. This looks like it could be a very, very strong skill indeed. Okay, so we go from the universally powerful to the very, very niche, but not as bad as I was expecting. Vaal Rejuvenation Totem really just screams. This is like various skills from back in the day when I used to play World of Warcraft. This feels like a major cooldown that you can use to prevent a lot of damage on yourself. The whole idea of Vaal Rejuvenation Totem is that you drop this down, it exceeds your normal totem limit, and it causes this totem to do 2 things. Firstly, while it lives, it heals you, but secondly, and probably more importantly, 40% of damage that you would suffer, and not just you, but also other targets that are in the area, other friendly targets like your other totems and your other minions, which might include other players, 40% of damage that they would suffer is instead redirected to this totem. So this can provide you with a tremendous boost to short-term survivability. However, there's a number of issues with it. It is a short duration. The totem lasts only 4 seconds. This is going to be very, very hard to use well. You can definitely use this if you're wanting to try to tank a very, very big telegraphed hit from a boss, but there's probably a better solution for that we'll come to later. All in all, I think Vaal Rejuvenation Totem is going to see very minimal use, but there will be people who do like it. Next, we'll jump to Animate Weapons Vaal version. Vaal Animate Weapon is something that I really need to see in action before I can say much more about. It has pretty good numbers on it. It summons a whole bunch of weapons at once, so it's like casting Animate Weapon a lot of times, and that's already quite compelling. Base duration of 15 seconds instead of the 40 seconds that Animate Weapon normally has. The base damage that these weapons do is 107% more instead of 38% more on Animate Weapon normally. So this is something like a 50% more multiplier in damage over what you would get if you cast Animate Weapon multiple times. But these weapons are also transformed into unique versions, and this is going to be a mixed bag. There's a number of unique weapons that are terrible as attack weapons, and as a result, they are just going to end up being worse than a white weapon would be. On the flip side, there will be some that are really good, and I just don't know how that's going to balance out. This is the sort of thing that really needs a lot of testing before we can say anything about how it's going to work. Next, we have Vaal Arctic Armor. Now, this is very much like going all in on the Vaal Rejuvenation Totem concept of a short-term, massive, massive, massive survivability burst that you can use on a cooldown. Now, it's got a 24-second soul gain prevention window. This is very long. It has a 50 soul cost. This means that you're not going to be able to spam this multiple times on a boss, but it's probably going to be there for you if you need it for a Maven memory game the first time that memory game comes up in a phase, for example. So this is going to provide you with a short-term almost invulnerability to hits. you will take 90% less damage from hits for as long as Vaal Arctic Armor persists. During this period, you cannot move, you cannot perform non-instant actions, and you count as frozen. And this ice breaks after you take 3 damaging hits or after the duration expires. Now the buff, while it's active, grants you 395 energy shield recharge per second, which might be enough to help deal with any degens that might be on the ground, or if it's not enough to totally counteract those degens, it might be enough that you can survive them in conjunction with your life flasks. However, the primary use case for this that I see is trying to use it to freeze your way through the Maven's Memory game. It's not just the Maven's Memory game, it'll probably include a few other boss slams as well. One thing I don't suggest is using this on the Searing Exarch's Bullet Hell phase, as I think you will find that that will hit you more than 3 times. The 3rd hit will remove your Vaal Arctic Armor. At that point, you're going to have a pretty fearsome ignite on you. The Searing Exarch's Bullet Hell phase inflicts pretty nasty ignites on you anyway, and Vaal Arctic Armor is not going to really provide you with any mitigation of those ignites. It will provide you with great mitigation against the hits, but it will not deal with these sorts of damage over time effects. Vaal Arctic Armor is very niche, but I do think that some people will like to have this security blanket, and I think it will probably see more use in hardcore than it will in softcore. Okay, so next we have Vaal Ice Shot, which is a skill that really addresses the weaknesses inherent in Ice Shot. Ice Shot is a fantastic skill in general for clear, but it has a real weakness, and that is that it tends to be bad even against map bosses, and obviously much worse when it comes to heavier bosses than map bosses. Vaal Ice Shot addresses this by summoning 6 clones. Each of these will basically fire half strength ice shots, and these will fire only 1 projectile. However, they will focus fire on your primary target. So 6 clones, each doing 50% of your damage, is going to be a short-term quadrupling of your damage. So you're still dealing 100% damage, but all these clones are dealing 50% as well each, for a total of 400% damage. That's really substantial. And that's why I think that this skill could be quite good at solving some of the weaknesses Vaal Ice Shot has at single target damage. If you don't burst a boss down during the period Vaal Ice Shot is up, you're going to have a pretty miserable time afterwards, but I do think most of the time you'll be able to do that. I think the numbers on this are pretty favourable. You generally don't want to use this in conjunction with increased projectiles, because modifiers to the number of projectiles do not apply to this skill when used by Mirage sharpshooters. If you must use damage projection supports in your Ice Shot, then you're going to want to use either Chain or Fork, rather than using something like Greater Multiple Projectiles. However, I think that this is at its best when it is linked to an Ice Shot that is not linked to any of those effects. Generally speaking, when people are playing Ice Shot and they're determined to kill bosses with it, they link Ice Shot to barrage support. Here, I think you're going to use Vaal Ice Shot, and you're just going to link it to damage supports instead, and it's going to be a totally different setup to what's used now, but I do think it could be quite good. Vaal Lightning Arrow is next, and I'm reserving judgment on this until I see it in practice. This is a skill that we really don't have enough information, even from the gem stats, because it's going to take a bit of experience to see just how damage projection on this one works. If it can hit the whole screen the way that it looks like it did in the video that was put out by GGG during the trailer, then this could be a phenomenal skill. However, we don't know that it's as good as it looked like there. Okay, so let's just jump to the best one now, Vaal Firestorm. I mean, this skill, when I saw the damage numbers on this, I was like, what on earth? The effectiveness of added damage stat is 760%. To give you a couple of comparisons there, Fireball is 370%. Fireball is a clunky and awkward skill. Discharge is 600%. Vaal Firestorm lands more severe ignites than a 20-stage Divine Ire. This is a monstrously hard-hitting skill, and that's really what it needs to be. I think that a lot of Ignite builds are going to want to seriously consider putting Vaal Firestorm into Vaal Caress and using those as their gloves. It's not the perfect solution for everyone, but it is going to be the perfect solution for a lot of people, and that's going to be something that I think we will see a lot of in 3.21. As for Vaal Firestorm on hit builds, I am reserving judgment until we see the exact mechanics of how this skill spirals in. If it's the sort of skill that can hit large monsters multiple times, then this is going to be a monster for hit skills. If on the other hand, it's a skill that struggles to hit monsters that are moving, then it's not going to be a useful hit skill. That's something we just need to hold off and see. Last thing on Vaal Firestorm, it may be that this is a skill you want to use in conjunction with Decoy Totem. Decoy Totem is there as a way to pin a monster in place while you drop a devastating attack on it, or alternately as a way to distract that monster so that it doesn't chew on your leg. Now, if you can pin a monster in place while it fights your Decoy Totem for a little bit, then drop a Vaal Firestorm on its head, That's a way of dealing with all of the weaknesses that this skill might have if there's a considerable delay. But all of that needs to be tested. The damage numbers on this, though, are so good that it's worth testing. And while Firestorm wasn't great before 3.21 brought along Vaal Firestorm, it's not like it was derisory either. It was sort of serviceable, and the Vaal version being so good may be exactly what it needed. Okay, so unfortunately that's the peak. We're going to be moving down a little bit, and in fact we're going to be moving down a lot with Snipe. Snipe I just can't really see any use case for at the moment. Snipe is a skill that already existed as an item supplied skill on the unique helmet Asylum. Now the unique helmet Asylum has been buffed a little bit in patch 3.21, as well as the change that was sort of not really a change, where they changed it from gem level 20 to gem level 30, but kept the stats the same. Asylum is now also going to can have 2 more stages of Snipe. So that's something that is going to be an improvement on Asylum, but Snipe itself really doesn't seem to do all that much from what I can tell. I don't see a use case for this unless there is a change in the meta and bleed bows become good again, or maybe ignite bows. There are a few real corner cases I can think of, like for instance if you had a bow that had some of the damage projection mods that exist at the moment. So Shaper and Crusader exclusive, socketed bow attacks chain 1 additional time, or the Crusader exclusive, socketed bow attack skills fork 1 additional time. These could conceivably do something silly in conjunction with Snipe and the right other setup, but I don't see what it is yet. I'm going to see this as a bit of a puzzle that might get solved over time, but for now I'm thinking if GGG buff bleed again in the future, then take another look at this. Until that point, I don't think this gets there. I hope you can prove me wrong. Manaforged arrows is next. Now this is a really difficult skill to read, but what we're going to do is we're going to have a look at a little helmet that you might have forgotten exists. Indigon. Indigon drops from Uber Elder, and it has the very interesting text, 50 to 60% increased cost of skills for each 200 mana spent recently. Note that this is 50 to 60% increased cost of skills. Nothing about this is about spells. That's going to be important when we have another look at Manaforged arrows. So, supports bow attack skills, causing them to trigger when you've spent enough mana in total on other bow attacks. Cannot modify the skills of minions. Cannot support things that are coming from proxies, so totems, traps, mines, Vaal skills, or channeling skills. Now, the 2020 stats on this. Supported skills have 10% increased CDR. Supported skills deal 31% less damage. Supported skills deal 1% more damage with hits and with ailments per 1 mana cost. So, if you can get that mana cost up to 500, then suddenly this is doing 500% more damage with hits and ailments. You are copying a 31% penalty on damage, but even then, that is still a very, very large total number of damage. That's 414% of base damage once you combine those 2 mods together. Supported skills trigger once total mana spent on other bow attacks exceeds 300% of their mana cost. So in our hypothetical scenario where the bow attack that is linked to Manaforged arrows is costing 500 mana, this means we need to spend 1500 mana on other bow attacks. The only way we're going to get there is with Indigon, but once you set that off, that's going to be a really, really massive hit. Now, when you're doing one really, really massive hit, what's the best way to scale that? It's either with Ignite at the moment, because Ignite is good, or theoretically it could be with Bleed. But Bleed's bad at the moment, so you use Ignite. Alternately though, you can use Manaforged arrows totally differently if your entire goal is just to trigger a skill that isn't really intended to do much damage, but that has some utility value. And Frenzy is the skill you would probably want to trigger here. So when Frenzy hits an enemy, you're going to gain a Frenzy charge. Manaforged arrows linked to Frenzy on an archer character is going to be a good source of Frenzy charges. Maybe you're content to use Blood Rage instead, but if you're not, Manaforged arrows linked to Frenzy is definitely an option that's worth considering. There's going to be a lot of other things that people think of to do with this because it is just such an open-ended skill that does so many interesting things. Okay, so now we come to 2 complete stinkers. Momentum support. Momentum support just strikes me as a worse version of faster attacks. This is what is replacing what used to be called onslaught support. This allows you to gain momentum when you use a supported skill. Then you lose all momentum if you move. And supported skills have 20% increased attack speed per momentum. When you reach 5 momentum, you lose all momentum and you gain swiftness for 2 seconds, which is a movement speed boost. Now the movement speed boost is massive. This is a 75% move speed boost, except it's only for 2 seconds, and it's only as a reward for having stopped and swung 5 times. Now that is generally not going to be worth it as a movement speed boost, especially given that you're giving up using a better support gem here. Now let's compare this to faster attacks. Faster attacks is just better. Your average amount of increased attack speed that you get from using momentum support, if you kept using it a long time, you'd be swinging with 0, then 1, then 2, then 3, then 4 momentum. Then you'd repeat the cycle again, 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 0, 1, 2, 3, 4. This would be an average of 2 momentum, so an average of 40% increased attack speed. But in practice, you're not going to always swing a multiple of 5 times. And when you don't swing a multiple of 5 times, you end up getting less than this average bonus. If you swing 6 times then move, you're going to have an average of 33% increased attack speed. In short, this is just really not a very good skill. Additionally, that 2-second boost of burst speed is not going to be very reliable, because what happens if you've swung 3 more times after you got that? Well, maybe those 3 swings took 700 milliseconds, and now you've only got 1300 milliseconds that you've got this uber burst of speed. For this reason, I think momentum support goes straight into the dustbin of unused skills, and is probably going to stay there for a very long time. You might use it if you accidentally roll it as a Vaal Corruption on an item. Prismatic Burst is the last skill. Now this is a skill that I read wrong when I was first going through it, and I wanted to share that mistake I made with you, because if I've made the mistake, probably someone that's watching this has made it as well. Prismatic Burst is not adding damage to your skill, instead it is providing a new spell that triggers. Now because this is a new spell, this is not something that scales up with the effectiveness of added damage multiplier of other skills, or with the equivalent on attack skills. Ultimately, this is just its own triggered spell, and it's on about a 520 millisecond cooldown at gem level 20, which is fairly high. Ultimately, I think that Prismatic Burst is not doing enough damage, and I don't see a way to make this work as a gem. However, there is a very significant use case for this, and this is if you happen to get lucky enough to get a Forbidden Shaco that has a level 33, 34, or 35 Prismatic Burst on it. At that point, I think you'll find there will be truly, truly amazing damage. In short, this skill is like decay support. Don't use it except when it's attached to a Forbidden Shaco, and then it could be very, very, very good. If I was forced to build around Prismatic Burst support, I would probably be looking to use attack-based wands and have a Crown of Eyes set up on my character, as that would allow me to scale both the base hit damage of my character and also the Prismatic Burst spell. But that's if I was forced to use it. Ultimately, I don't think the numbers are so good that I'm willing to do so, because really, the effectiveness of added damage on it is only 280%. This is something like 30% less damage than Fireball, and it's something that has a long cooldown between skills, and as a result, I just don't think it gets there. Anyways, that's my thoughts on the 3.21 gems. I hope I'm wrong on some of the ones that I thought were underwhelming, but the one that really stands out the most for me is Vaal Firestorm. I think Vaal Reap will slot best into existing builds, and Vaal Absolution and Vaal Dominating Blow will both be excellent. Some of the others will be niche role players, others will be pet favourite skills of some players without necessarily being all that good, and others provide interesting build-around challenges that may or may not end up being really great, but that do something genuinely interesting. May your Vaal Orbs have interesting results.